We know it's one of our key areas of focus, but more importantly, it connects with everything. So if you look at the 7 areas of focus, if we want clean water, we need to protect the environment. If we want clean air, we need to protect the environment. If we want peace, we can't have peace if then very important resources such as rivers and food are in crisis and everybody wants it. So it is key on every part of our area of focus is how we protect the environment. So talking about environment, this is where I live. I live in the Upper Blue Mountains, west of Sydney. It is a beautiful part of the world. And oops, we've just got somebody, they're on mute now. A beautiful part of the world, and I'm surrounded by World Heritage. So to me, the environment is, part of my backyard, the beauty of the environment. However, everything can be at stress if we don't care for it. And I'll go through some of those issues. Look, firstly, I know it's a joke, but we have the power to impact on our future. And when it comes to power, of course, we're in a pretty global crisis at the moment with fuel and diesel and the impact of how we rely so much on fuel and on world trade and on shipping and all those things. And it's only at times like this we realise how much we need to protect our environment because we don't have enough of some of the things that are needed. Or we need to look forward to, are there better ways of managing energy? So we do have the power, even though we sometimes feel, well, what hope do we have? Every Rotarian and every Rotary Club does have the power to impact our future. It may only be at the community level, but if you look at thousands of communities, we can make a difference. So let's look at the state of the environment in Bahrain and surrounding areas. Well, we've got significant threats with coral reefs, seagrass, mangroves, all those areas that impact on an ecosystem. There is, of course, water scarcity, and with that, then you look at the desalination, but the impact of desalination. We choose very short-term, high-energy ways of trying to manage problems rather than looking at the more long-term, what can we do and how can we manage and live within environmental sustainability rather than our short-term response. So we look at all these issues and our vulnerability, and we share that. It's not just Bahrain, Australia, many countries have these challenges. So let's look at what we are doing. First of all, we look at progress, and progress we think about industrial growth, we think about wealth, and that then has a negative impact on air quality. And yet we need air to breathe. We need clean air to breathe. If you look at the particulates that things like diesel and burning causes, we have, for example, in India, speaking to an Indian doctor a few months ago, he knows that living in New Delhi would take 10 years off his life. So that's just because of air quality. Then looking at land, how we treat our land. Again, we're taking away with desertification and destruction of our good soil, we are taking away the potential for nutrients and therefore the potential for food and growth of food and leaving in the end more desert. Finally, and this isn't again only Bahrain, but many countries, including Australia, we have found that when shipping comes into port and they let go of their ballast water, we get invasive species, and that has a negative impact on local habitats. In fact, it can destroy local habitats. So we're in a conundrum. We all care for our environment, and yet we live off things like forestry, fishing, intensive farming, intensive use of transport, trucks and cars, mining, energy, all those factors. And then because we build wealth, in building wealth, we build waste, and we don't manage our waste disposal well. And of course, the final is we all want to live a better life that results in building, construction, both residential and commercial. So that's how we make our living. And yet, if people asked us what we value, it's quite different. If you said, what is the most important thing? Well, we start off with health. No matter how rich or how poor, if you don't have good health, you don't have a long life and you don't have a life with quality. And yet the things we do to earn a living have such grave impacts on our health. We think of a sound economy. Now, a sound economy doesn't necessarily mean progress. It means a balanced, sound economy. How do you balance that and sustainability? Of course, our identity, who we are, what we value. In our country, if we talked about what we value, we love koalas. And yet, we are removing their habitat so quickly, we wonder, will they be around in 30 years? We have a beautiful bird called the superb fairy wren. It is almost at the point of extinction, again, because what we do with the habitat. So we say nature is important to us, but we turn around and we blindly destroy it. Our culture is important to us. And again, that's an inconsistency with what we value and what we do. Our recreation, well, in Australia, and I'm sure in many countries, people love fishing. But when you pollute a river, therefore, fish die and there is no more fishing. Again, with our oceans. Finally, stability and family. But if we do value these, we need to look in a more long-term way of managing our environment, because we can't have everything we value and everything we want to have a high standard of living. How do we balance these things? So let's look at Bahrain's environmental state in 2022. And I did get some information about 2024, but there wasn't a lot of difference. So what we have here is that Bahrain is working towards tightening environmental law and tightening environmental protection. It's not easy because there's so many things that need to be done, and it comes at a cost, such as with rapid economic growth, the pressure on the marine environment. They're looking at making a commitment to greenhouse gas for 2035. Now, that commitment will take a lot of work. If you think you can reach that by 2035, it's going to take a rethinking on how industry works and what people do in their lives. Waste management, not only plastic pollution, but clothing has become one of the key things in our waste cycle. Plastic bottles, that's such a concern in many countries, and yet it can be so easily remedied by changing behaviour and changing attitudes. So at the moment, unfortunately, Bahrain's not doing too well, but at least they have a plan. And if that plan is implemented and people back that plan, then hopefully its score over the next 10 years will improve. So what do we have in Australia now? We have extremes, and we're seeing it more and more. We get flood on one part of the country, fires in the other part, we get desertification, and we get extreme weather events. We've had snow in March. Now, March is early autumn. We normally wouldn't get snow till the end of May, maybe June. Often they say that it's the first weekend in June. So these extreme weather events mean that we are not managing, our insurance isn't coping, and in fact, many insurance companies are just refusing to insure people and businesses. When they do, some of the insurance is 80 to 100,000 just to insure a residential home because of the increased risk. Now, this is nothing new. When I was an advisor on the environment in 1997, insurance companies were warning that this is not sustainable. Unfortunately, we're a little bit slow in responding because some of the things we see are in the future. In other words, we only react to emergencies. We're very slow to react to that slow change. And now it's hit us. We actually can't go backwards. We have to work on how can we manage and mitigate our losses. So there's what we call a rule of three. You know, I don't talk about greenhouse gases and global warming. Everybody would argue about all of those things. Let's just keep it simple where nobody can disagree. We need clean air. You can't live without air after 3 minutes. So that's a must. 3 minutes and we're gone. So we need air. We need shelter. You know, in extreme weather, be it heat or cold, often we only have 3 hours of protect. After that, we are unlikely to survive. So shelter is vital. Water. Without clean water, we're gone in 3 days. And without food, we don't last 3 weeks. So when we look at that rule of three, it makes sense. We have to have good, healthy soil in order to provide food and healthy oceans and rivers in order to provide food. We need clean water to drink, and we need clean air to be able to breathe without developing diseases that will shorten our life. And I don't think anybody can argue those issues. So if you're looking at working with a global grant with the Rotary Foundation, or even a smaller Rotary project, these are some of the things that we focus on with the Rotary Foundation. Are you looking to conserve or preserve a natural habitat or biodiversity? And that could be along the lines of conserving, for example, in Australia, a habitat that provides food for koalas or for other species. The other next is what can we do to mitigate the change caused by climate change? Now, that may be working towards reducing deforestation, planting out trees, looking at other ways that we can protect, reduce carbon, and look at how we can keep what we need to mitigate that. Some of the examples are in some parts of the world, they are changing from black tarred roads to white concrete. That change is making a 6 degrees difference in the urban areas. Or in planting shade trees, it can make up to 10 degrees difference from shade to areas without shade. We look at then again facilitating the communities to adapt. Where we live in the South Pacific, we have got islands that are needing to learn how to adapt to significant impact of salination, of the soils, and of course the oceans. And then on that basis, this strengthening environmental equity. There are communities in the world who are suffering because of the actions of others. It is our responsibility to provide support for those communities, Kiribati and other islands, and probably where you live as well. There'll be areas within where you live that will need support because of the impact on the changing climate. So where do you start? You might see a need, but the first thing is to gather information from stakeholders. Is this the priority? What is the greatest environmental need in your community? Stakeholders may be educators, universities, scientists. Check in with all those stakeholders and help them and you to assess what is the need, what is critical, what is needed, and then work with the community to look at sustainable change. So it all starts with impact. What do you see? What is your vision for change? And how are you going to measure it to know that what your actions, your projects have done has actually made sustainable change? Now, there's lots of people in Rotary that can assist you on putting together a project and putting together a community assessment. And these are some of the questions that you would ask. What is the greatest environmental threat right now to your community? Any cultural practices that may be relevant, that may support and change or have adverse impacts. For example, in India, where they will be burning bodies in the Ganges, the impact on that, on pollution, is considerable, especially because they also use that area for bathing and for water. And then you have to look at what are the implications, positive and negative, of your project, short term and long term. Finally, we look at stewardship. Doing a project is not simply going out there and planting trees or cleaning up a river. You have to look at the sustainability of the work you do. In other words, changing what the people, the community see as important. That means it takes education and advocacy, and it takes long term. These aren't short term projects. Planting a tree where 3/4 of them die is not worth doing. Any project within the environment will take endurance and careful monitoring and community support. So, of course, you finish with a call to action because it starts with together. It may be your club needs to partner with others, other experts, cadres of the Rotary Foundation. A cadre is an expert in a particular field who can give you guidance. So seek out partners, be it Rotary partners or partners in your community with expertise, and work together so you can make a lasting change. And this is important. You know, I look at our earth. First of all, it's the only place I know where we can live. And how we treat our earth is how we treat ourselves because it's our home. So let's look at preserving, conserving, and rehabilitating our home rather than allowing it to be destroyed. And I use the term allow because we may not be doing it, but if we remain silent, we are allowing the destruction to happen. So this month, why don't you start talking with the community and find out what are the priorities, what are the needs, and seeing what together we can make a difference. So I'm going to escape now and we can go back on. I'm going to stop sharing when I work out how to do that. Let's hear, stop share. And I know I've given you a lot of information. But I'm happy to send those slides, especially in the importance of how you go through a community assessment to work out the priorities and the needs of your community. And it's a perfect month to do so when it's an environment month. Back over to you, Hanadi.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jennifer. This was truly inspiring. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking of Sahel. I was thinking of all the projects that have had some success in our little planet. And there is hope. There's definitely hope. And if we join forces, if we're able to look at the success stories that already exist in the world, we can perhaps make that change, you know, because the water wells that we are always taking water from are the reason why we have there's desertification. And honestly, I didn't know that until I spoke to my niece. She basically she was quite aware about the environment. She told me that this was a huge issue on the planet, and that's why deserts kept growing. So it's even on a practical level, it's even something that we could do in Bahrain. But anyway, thank you so much for this. And I want to open this up to questions. We have a wonderful group of people attending.
I'd love to know the different backgrounds. If there anybody here tonight, or it's tonight, it's 9:30 for me, with background in science and the environment, because it's your skills and your knowledge of your own country that counts, such as you said, the impact of taking water, that deep water that preserves life in times of need, where in our country too, most of our country, would you believe, is desert. We're known as a veranda society. We all live on the edge looking out because the inside of Australia is rather inhospitable. That's why we only have 26 million. Big country, but very little water.
Interesting.
So happy to
So,
take questions or comments.
anybody with a question? Okay, we have
Yes.
our Deputy District Governor, Faisal Jum'a. He has a
Hi,
question.
good afternoon. No, I just wanted to mention thank you very much to Jennifer to accepting our invitation to be a speaker. And I also have to mention thank you very much to Melanie for also accepting our invitation. And since April is a very important month, that's why we wanted more than one speaker to talk about the environment, especially the environment is such an important topic. So I believe we will slot you in next week, Melanie. I'm sure somebody already spoke to you about that, or they will. Okay, sorry about that. So they will send you a notification about that shortly. You're slotted in for next week. So, but being that this is a very important topic, we decided to have as many speakers talk about this as much as possible. And also, I have to thank Madhu, who arranged Jennifer. She's with us in the session today. Madhu is with me on the Rotary on the Internet Fellowship, and she was very helpful in arranging Jennifer today. So I would like to thank her since she's with us today. And my question to Jennifer Scott is that, one second, sorry. Is that there was in the early 90s and the 80s, there was a talk about the ozone layer, don't use hairspray, don't use these chemicals, don't use this and that. And that sort of, I don't hear much about that anymore. So has that been resolved, or is this, what happened to that topic?
It's almost resolved. This is the great thing that actually global legislation, when I mean global, all countries came on board and agreed there were certain chemicals and gases that were impacting on the ozone layer. If you remember our old refrigerators and all those things that had certain gases, so all of those were phased out. There is no longer a hole in the ozone layer, but it is thin in parts. And the thinnest area just happens to be Australia. So with the ozone layer, you wouldn't say it's healthy, but it's much better than what it was 30 years ago. And as long as we watch those chemicals that created that hole and take care with what we do, we should be okay. But it's one of those things that if we forget about it, we may have that same risk. So that is probably a relatively good success story, except it's still pretty thin where we live. And that's why we get the worst sunburn than anyone else because of the thinness. So it's a little bit more complex than that. I'm not a scientist, but that's the simple. There's still a way to go, but we have got rid of those key chemicals or gases that was causing the hole in the ozone layer getting bigger. Does that make sense, Melanie? If you've got better understanding with a science background, please step in.
I think you nailed it. Just to say that in the science community, we really hold that up as a exemplar example of how the world can coordinate for environmental action. So the Montreal protocol brought that in and regulated what countries could and couldn't use in terms of the CFC gases, and everyone sort of took that on board, banded together globally, and came up with a solution. And
right.
We're well on to fixing that problem. So yeah, we definitely hold that up as a very good example of the world coming together to solve a massive social impact problem.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I see we have a question from Mariami.
Hello. Yes.
Hi, Mariami. Hello.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for a super interesting presentation. I have a following question. I am a lawyer as well, so my question goes to that part. I totally understand that when we're talking about protecting the environment, we have crucial role in it as a community. But on the other side, the government and the legislative bodies have another part of crucial role in the process. In Georgia, for example, today we have new law coming force restricting all the single-use plastics, meaning that from tomorrow we cannot buy water, any kind of liquid in the plastic bottles, and anything else, which I think might have a devastating effect on the economics when we're talking about developing country like Georgia. So I was thinking that for the environmental purposes, this legislation might be super helpful. But on the other hand, when we are talking about economics, it might be very bad for the Georgian economics because a lot of business will just leave the country because they need to replace their old system to the glass. So where is this line from your perspective when we are measuring the goods and values? How can we still protect the environment without damaging the other goods we have and without causing the protest? Because in my believing in my country, now we will have a real big protest about it and nobody's going to think about, oh, it's good for the environment. They will think about their own problems they will face because of this bill.
It is a dilemma. There's no question. And part of that dilemma is coming up with solutions before you legislate. You see, legislation without answers is a government just trying to say, look at us, aren't we great? It is actually, you have within industry a time period. So, for example, when in Australia we were looking at significant change, we brought together the leaders in pollution and waste and said, this is what we want to do. And the response was, give us 10 years. This is going back many years ago. Give us 10 years. Government, don't change your mind. Be consistent and we can pivot. But we can't pivot overnight. We can create, that's not an issue because industry is forever changing. And if you don't legislate, industry is happy to keep on doing the old cheap thing. So you need both. First, letting them know, and secondly, giving them time to create the alternative. Now, with single plastics, globally, they've found alternatives. So it's then a matter of how do we change our industrial processes, because that will cost, and we have to invest in those changes. So it will take time, not just legislation, but a discussion and a government that says, we'll give you some time. So it's a stick in the carrot. We'll give you some time. We'll support you and give you time with the change. But let us tell you, then you will be punished if you fail. That is if you have a government that hasn't given time and had the conversation, well, then that's a challenge. But standing still, Georgia will go backwards and your environment will be so badly damaged, you wonder if you could still live there in the future. So it is your responsibility, not the government's. It's all our responsibility to change. And government can't do it alone. So start with looking at solutions. Does that make sense, Mariman?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it does. A lot. Yes, what I was mostly referring about is that us as a community should have an interest in working on environmental problems. And when we have the new legislation coming up that can only cause anger in the society, it is harder to make them, like society and community, think about environment and do something about environment. That was my problem about our new legislation here.
Yeah. So pivot and think, what is good about it? Because we can complain all we want and our earth will die. Look at what's good about it and what I call chunk it down into small pieces. What little bit can we do now? And to build on that, I was in Chandigarh in India in 2011. Now, that's a massive country with millions, and that area is massive. And they had already got rid of single-use plastic in 2011 in that part of India. So it's not impossible. Just think about the positive ways, imaginative ways of change. But industry does need a breather. Melanie, I notice you have your hand up.
I've almost forgotten what I was going to say. I think it was.
Sorry.
There's so much. No, that's okay. It's a very interesting discussion. I was going to say there are a lot of new research findings coming out all the time on the health impacts of plastic. And what we're seeing socially is that this translates to people wanting to have less plastic in their lives and on the ground making change. And so I think you'll find when those conversations start happening in those communities you speak of, they'll understand more that it's not just a decision from the higher uppers. It is actually to benefit their health and the health of their kids and grandkids as well as the environment. And we're seeing this big shift now that it's become, a human health issue, not just an environmentally unfriendly practice. So yeah, there's huge shifts there. Some examples of where this has actually worked in practice, not around plastic, but something different, is Southeast Asia. We were seeing lots of manta rays, beautiful big, like stingray fish, and they were being captured at a higher rate than they can replenish their own population, becoming very, very critically endangered. And it was all for their gill rakers. Their gill rakers, which on a ray are actually down here, they were used in traditional Chinese medicine. So Southeast Asians were killing the manta rays, just cutting out their gill rakers. They dry them out, ship them off as powder, and they're used in traditional medicine. And they really saw it as a resource and their source of income. And a few amazing people came in and said, hey, what if we solved this by solving the economics for the area? They want to be able to provide food and resources for their children. So how do we change that whole system? And what they did is flip it. So they first made those the fishermen aware of these beautiful, majestic creatures. They'd never really sort of dived around these rays, and they saw how amazing they were. And that triggered something, and it shifted the entire system to, hey, if we protect them, then we can share them with other people that will pay to see them. And so the system shift from fishing to ecotourism, and now lots of those areas actually rely on ecotourism for their funding, and the animals were recovering, and it's a really good story of that economical shift based on like solving the problem, but just looking at it in a different way. So yeah.
That's it. And looking at what do we value, and when it's gone and can't be replaced, it's too late. So understanding the value. And I look at many of these things. If you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of need, when you have very little, you just take what you can and you use what you can, be it eating insects, be it killing elephants, whatever. So it's working first on how do we change that base to provide what people need so they don't destroy what is so essential. And that's working on then on all aspects of how we live and what we value. As I said, we've got a lifestyle, and then that's inconsistent with what we value. Melanie, thank you for that. And Nadia, I'm not sure if there are any other questions.
I actually wanted to ask you something about the garbage that we see in the oceans. I know that it's been a pending issue, and because of the way that the waves are and the currents are in the sea, they seem to accumulate in certain areas. So I think there's 11 pockets of garbage that is just like incredible amounts of garbage. And do you know if countries are changing how they dispose of garbage, or what the solutions for that? Are we in a better place today than we were, let's say, 10 years ago?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. And I don't think so because still we have governments or local councils, so at all levels, who look at short-term solutions. So for the last 10 years, many governments have been saying, well, here we are, we come and recycle and we will collect, but they ship it off to developing countries who cannot manage the waste either. There was a time when the waste could be broken down and reused. But now, as wealth has increased, those countries that would reuse the waste. So it starts with not creating it to begin with. That's the first. What do we really need to create? Plastic bottles. Well, we can just use metal bottles or whatever and refill. How do we see water? I get so annoyed when I see people buying water in Australia. You just have to turn on a tap. We have in just about every part of Australia good, clean water on tap. So I don't think it's getting better. There's greater awareness, but that awareness isn't turning into action. I mean, as a scuba diver, when I scuba dive and I see styrofoam foam, I see plastic, and I think the impact of that, and of course we know about the impact with microplastics. We are poisoning our food source. So is it getting better?
Mercury as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a pessimist. I have not seen large-scale improvement. I have seen great community work. I've seen great small government work, but I've not seen large-scale national in most countries. I mean, yes, Singapore does a lot of good, but they're also rehabilitating the damage they've done along their borders where they've destroyed things in expanding the country. So every country, even the ones that look great, have caused a lot of damage and aren't taking things in a long-term way. I hope it changes. I'm an optimist in that we can do what we can do in our own communities and try and influence change nationally. But we've got a long way to go.
We do, especially in where we see there's international waters. And so the responsibility is diffused amongst many nations, and no one really wants to take the lead on solving the problem. So that's part of the problem. Melanie,
See,
you want
that's, yeah. Sorry, Melanie, yes.
Oh, pick me. I love this topic, plastic pollution, you can see, and plastic
Yep.
food.
Not only plastic. Yeah.
Not only plastic. I look at sort of, climate change as a waste problem. Plastic is obviously a waste problem. Our biggest threat to biodiversity loss, which will impact our food security, is waste. In terms of plastic, in 2025, I think they've said we produced over 4.4 million tons. We're on an exponential trajectory in plastic production still, with all this awareness, with all the health science coming out. We're still on an upwards trajectory, an exponential one in plastic production. We've got about 8.3 billion tons of plastic that we've produced since it was sort of created in the 1950s that we now have to deal with as microplastics, nanoplastics that we're seeing in bodies, in babies, in testicles, in breast milk, in soils. It's in our food supply. So this is a major thing that that we need to sort of tackle. There's a global plastics treaty that they're trying to get up and running, which will looks like it could be similar to climate change in that we've got signatories on board, but then, it really is a bunch of pledges at this stage. So hence why for Mariami, countries are probably bringing in legislation and bans right now because they have pledged change in that space. But we know now that 25% of, I think it's roughly about 25% of chemicals that they use in plastic are either toxic or considered carcinogenic.
Yeah.
And not just for humans, for all animals. So yeah, it's definitely something we can talk further about. And I can't wait now because the presentation that I prepared for you is not a normal environmental presentation, but more around systems thinking and how we get our individual actions to sort of ripple out to be bigger. And Rotary is obviously a key way to do that. Yeah. So I look forward to next week. It's not as depressing.
We'll look forward to that, Melanie.
Hanadi, one of the issues, and it's nothing new, it was a paper written in the 1960s called The Tragedy of the Commons. You see, the worst pollution is in our oceans, and it's because none of us own it. We all want to take as much as we can, but none of us care about it. So that's the tragedy of the commons. We take more care of our own land because we own it. But when it belongs to everyone, we all want to take. And we don't consider the impact of us all trying to take as much as possible. And of course, when it comes to pollution, well, it's not my problem. It's the ocean. We don't own the ocean, so we don't fix it. That's the tragedy of the commons. So as Rotarians, we look at how do we care for everything, not simply what we own. And that's worthwhile thinking about anything that is important for all, like the air we don't own, but it impacts on all of us. The oceans we don't own, but it impacts on all of us. So, some of this is not new. It is more it's a general we, not Rotarians, a general we haven't cared enough to do anything about it until it becomes an emergency.
True. Very sad indeed, that there isn't more of an
Robert.
effort.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a very enlightening talk. And thank you also for being a Rotary director. I'm a district governor nominee in Canada and looking at trying to create some awareness around Rotary and the environment in my district. And I'm fully aware of things like Rotary and I guess it's Earth Day, SREG. Is there any advice from the Rotary directorship level, Rotary International, how to create awareness in my district on the environment? So a little bit different than what we've been talking about, but from your perspective as a Rotary director, any advice you could pass on to me?
Everything starts with the club, Robert. As you know, being a governor, that it's only the club that can actually change things. And I sometimes suggest you start with trivia, where you bring up the awareness, but in a fun way. And it's like, wow, I didn't know that. It may be how many tons of debris are in the ocean, so you bring up with trivia, and then it's that awareness. But of course, from awareness, you then turn and say, let's, as a club, look at our own community. Because if we looked at the big picture, it can get depressing. It can. But if you start with your own community and do that assessment, talk to the local government, talk to the schools, bring that community assessment, and you go out and say, we want to get an idea, measure the health of our local environment. And with the measuring, this is where, if you look at under the area of focus, some of the criteria, you'll pick up some of those measurements. And that would be fascinating because people would be interested to look at, well, what does the soil look like in the different parts? What's our air like? Are there any environmental health issues? So it's your own Rotary clubs in your community, in your district, doing a state of the environment in their own backyard. And from there, they can look at what action can they take. Because that can be a shock or it can be a relief of, well, we're doing pretty well. What are we doing that is making us successful? And that's a good question as well. And how can we share our success with other communities? Does that make sense, Robert?
Yep. Thank you. That's a great idea. Great ideas.
Perfect. Are there any more questions? Okay, I'm gonna pass on the conversation to our Deputy District Governor, Faisal Jama. He had a few words he wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Hanadi. No, I mentioned it earlier. I just wanted to thank both Jennifer and Melanie for attending today. And Melanie, we'll see you next week. And I apologize for the miscommunication from our side. And with that, I believe it's getting 10 o'clock, so it's almost close to your bedtimes in Australia. So we appreciate that you're making the. Sorry, Jennifer.
No, that's okay. Yes, I have a 6 a.m. radio meeting as well. So, yes.
If you don't mind, I just want to thank Jennifer. Mazen Amran, I'm a past district governor of the Rotary Club of Manama of District 2452. I've attended a few sessions of yours, and nice to see you again, Melanie. I've seen you before in other sessions. Thank you both. And we'll hope to see you next week, Melanie. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Mazen. It's great to see you on board with us today.
Thank you.
All right. We have Ernesto.
Hello from Germany.
Hello.
Right now, I'm lived in Bahrain for the past 17 years, and it's very sad right now the situation. And when I was still working with KPMG, we started the first sustainability job and reporting with GPIC, one of the biggest Gulf petrochemical companies in the Middle East. And from there on, we had several of sustainability work to do in various industries. And my observation is that it started slowly, but now it's on a further engagement also from all other industries and the people itself. And they are on a very good way to clean up the waters and to clean up the air, but it's still a long way to go. And unfortunately, now we had a bad situation that we might occur a very big setback in our sustainability efforts in Bahrain because of the missiles and drones from the other side of the Gulf. And for example, Aluminium Bahrain was hit very hard, and also the refinery, and it has a huge impact, especially after the modernization of the BAPCO, also Bahrain petrochemical companies, and also GPIC in Alba. And I hope that it will be over soon, this big attack, and we can keep on going at our sustainability efforts in Bahrain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I am thinking of everyone in a very challenging part of the world, and caring for each one of you, because you may be a long way away, but you're part of the Rotary family, and we all want to see peace.
Thank you.
I will leave you to continue your meeting, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. I think we're approaching the 1 hour mark. Does anyone have any comments, anything you want to share, any feelings, thoughts? Okay. So
Stay safe,
yeah.
all of you.
Yes,
Thank
stay
you.
safe.
Stay
Bye.
safe to all, and sending you all my love.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you guys next Wednesday.
Okay. Bye.
All
Yeah.
right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice seeing everyone.
Good.
Even virtually is nice.